Think back to those early days, the ones you thought were perfect. You remember those tiny, weird moments. Maybe a joke that felt a little too sharp, or a sudden, unexplained silence when you were having a great time. You probably brushed it off. You told yourself they were just tired, or maybe they just had a quirky sense of humor. Well, look, you weren't experiencing a misunderstanding. You were being audited. You just didn't have the clipboard in your hand to see the marks they were making. See, while you were busy falling in love, they were busy running diagnostics. They weren't looking for a soulmate, they were looking for a set of permissions. Every time they accidentally crossed a boundary, showing up late without calling, or teasing you about something you're sensitive about, they were watching to see exactly how much you would tolerate before you spoke up. And more importantly, they were watching to see how easily they could talk you out of your own feelings once you did speak up. Alright, look, it feels heavy to realize that the person you trusted was actually treating your relationship like a laboratory experiment. But that's the reality of the hidden agenda. They needed to know if you were a fixer who would apologize for things you didn't do, or if you were someone who would hold them accountable. If you made excuses for them, you passed their test. If you let the small things slide to keep the peace, you gave them the green light to try something bigger. They were building a profile on your patience, your empathy, and your breaking point. You thought you were building a life together, they were just checking the structural integrity of your boundaries to see where they could eventually break through. So, let's talk about the stress test, the moment they poked at a wound just to see how long it would take for you to flinch. See, in a normal relationship, if you tell someone that a certain topic makes you uncomfortable, they make a mental note to protect that space. But in the hidden agenda, well, they make a mental note to revisit it. They want to see if your no actually means no, or if it just means not right now. They are testing the elasticity of your soul. Are you saying, you noticed that every time you had a big win at work or a moment of pure joy, they'd suddenly bring up a past mistake or start a petty argument about the dishes? That wasn't bad timing. That was a test to see if they could successfully hijack your emotional state. They needed to know if they were still the one holding the remote control to your moods. Alright, look, these tests are often disguised as jokes or accidents. It's the constant boundary pushing that feels so small you'd feel crazy for bringing it up. They'll forget a plan you made, or they'll tease you in front of your friends about something private. And they are watching. They are leaning back, metaphorically holding that clipboard, and checking to see your reaction. If you laugh it off, they mark you down as compliant. If you get upset but then accept a half-hearted non-apology like, you're just too sensitive, they mark you down as manageable. They are looking for the exact threshold of disrespect you're willing to swallow in exchange for a quiet evening. Well, look, the most calculated part of this agenda is the isolation test. They'll start small, maybe a comment about how your best friend doesn't really get you, or how your sister is a bit of a drain on your energy. They aren't trying to protect you. They are testing to see if you will choose them over your support system. They want to know if they can become your only source of truth. Are you telling, you started pulling away from the people who actually love you because it was just easier than dealing with the passive-aggressive comments from your partner? That's a failed exam. Not because you're weak, but because they successfully mapped out your desire for harmony and used it to wall you in. And here's the kicker, they keep these tests running even when things are good. especially when things are good. They'll throw a wrench into the piece just to see if you'll scramble to fix it. They want to see you auditioning for their love. They want to see you working, sweating, and explaining yourself while they sit back and evaluate your performance. Every time you pass, by staying, by forgiving the unforgivable, or by shrinking yourself to fit their mood, they don't value you more. They value your boundaries less. They aren't thinking, wow, this person really loves me. They're thinking, okay, so I can go this far next time. They are building a map of your vulnerabilities, and they're doing it while you're sleeping soundly, thinking you've finally found the one. So, are you telling, you started to notice that even when they weren't actively poking at you, you were still performing? Let's slow this down, because this is the most subtle part of the hidden agenda. This is the baseline test. See, once they've run enough stress tests on your boundaries, they step back just to see if you'll keep policing yourself even when they aren't in the room. Well, look, they aren't just testing your reaction to conflict anymore, they're testing your endurance for their absence. Are you saying, you found yourself checking your phone every 3 minutes, wondering if a 3-word text meant they were mad or just busy? That's the baseline they've created. They've successfully calibrated your internal compass to point toward their approval at all times. They want to see if they can make you earn a normal conversation. It's a silent exam to see if you've internalized their rules so deeply that they don't even have to enforce them anymore. Alright, look, they're watching to see if you'll start pre-apologizing for things that haven't even happened yet. I know you're tired, so I kept the kids quiet, or I didn't buy that dress because I thought you might think it's too much. Every time you do that, you're handing over a piece of your autonomy. They're sitting back, marking that clipboard again, realizing they don't even have to lift a finger to keep you in line. You're doing the work for them. You're auditioning for a role in a play they've already finished writing. And the scariest part? They're testing to see if you'll ever realize that the piece you're working so hard for is actually just a temporary truce they've granted you. So, are you telling, you finally reached a point where you realized the bar for their approval wasn't just high, it was moving? Let's slow this down, because this is the peak of the hidden agenda. This is the stage where they stop testing your patience and start testing your actual survival instincts. See, they've spent months, maybe years, collecting data on your resilience, your capacity for forgiveness, and how much emotional heavy lifting you're willing to do. And once they feel like they've solved you, once they know exactly which buttons to press to get a predictable result, the tests don't stop. They just get meaner. They aren't looking for a partner to build a life with, they were looking for a puzzle, and now that they've seen how you work, they're bored of the game. Well, look, this is where the evaluations become blatantly cruel. They want to see if they can treat you with total, freezing indifference and still have you show up at their door. Are you saying, you noticed they stopped even pretending to care about the rules they once set for you? Maybe they start staying out late without a word, or they stop hiding their interest in other people right in front of your face. They are watching to see if you'll finally stand up for yourself, or if you've been so conditioned by their previous mini-tests that you'll just sit there and take it. They are testing the absolute limits of your self-respect. They want to know, is there anything they can do that will actually make you leave? Alright, look, it's a dark kind of power trip. They are evaluating whether you've become a permanent fixture in their world, someone they can treat however they want without consequence, or if you're still a risk to their ego. If you cry and beg them to change, or if you spend hours analyzing their behavior to understand them, you've passed the test for them. You've shown them that your emotional state is still entirely dependent on their whims. But if you start to go quiet, not the pouting, quiet they're used to, but that deep, soul-level silence where you just stop caring, that's when they panic. Not because they love you, but because the subject is no longer responding to the stimulus. They are watching to see if they can break your spirit without actually losing the benefits you provide. They want the loyalty without the responsibility. Are you telling, you feel like a ghost in your own home, watching them live a life that doesn't seem to include you anymore? That is the result of the hidden agenda. They've audited every part of your personality until there's nothing left but the parts they can use. They've tested your heart until it's exhausted and your trust until it's shattered. They aren't waiting for the relationship to get better, they are waiting to see how long you'll stay broken before they decide to move on to someone who hasn't been tested yet. It was never about a future. It was always about the data. So, what happens when you finally stop being a subject in their experiment? Let's look at the truth. The moment you stop trying to pass their tests is the moment you actually win. See, they've spent all this time grading your reactions, your patience, and your loyalty, but they never stopped to think about what grade you were giving them. While they were busy auditing your boundaries, you were slowly gathering the evidence of their character. Well, look, once you see the hidden agenda, you can't unsee it. You realize that you weren't failing a relationship, you were being set up to fail an impossible exam designed by someone who doesn't want you to succeed. Are you saying, you're ready to take that clipboard out of their hands and tear it up? Because the only final grade that matters is the one you give yourself for having the courage to walk away from a game you never signed up to play. You aren't failing by leaving, you're finally graduating from a school that was never meant to teach you anything but how to disappear. Alright, look, they were testing to see how much of you they could take. Now, it's time to show them how much of you is officially off limits. They can keep their tests, their silent evaluations, and their shifting bars for someone else. You're done being a data point in someone else's power trip. You're moving back into a life where you don't have to audition just to be treated with basic human dignity. If you decide to.